Culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's a quote by Peter Drucker. And I've seen firsthand that plans are worthless without willing and capable people to carry it out. And so if you want a business to thrive, a culture, you have to have a culture that's foundational. And if you do not intentionally design your culture, your values, and how you do business, then an unintended culture will be developed, which may or may not be good. And it's generally not good. And so I brought Michael Weisman on today from Higher Ground Life Consultancy to discuss the importance of culture and what you can do to upgrade your current business culture. So Michael, welcome. And to start off, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you ended up today helping people establish better cultures in the
Yeah,
business.
well, it's great to be with you, David. Thank you for having me on the program today. I love talking about culture in general. I've spent a lot of years of my life studying it from the inside and the outside looking in. And I'll just tell you that, my career began many years ago. I grew up watching Bewitched
Mm,
on television. If any of your listeners even remember that show, but Darren Stevens was the ad guy, and I was so captivated by his ability to be creative. And of course, he had a wife that could make anything better. But that was actually my impetus for advertising. I was always drawn towards storytelling as a young kid.
okay. Yep.
And so that was a profession that I just found myself in. And what I didn't realize going in was the toxicity of the business climate around it.
Mm,
Advertising and marketing tends to be a very transactional
yep.
business.
It can be.
And it's kind of the what have you done for me lately? And so fast forward, I spent about 42 years of my life in marketing communications. I was the CEO of an advertising firm, and we had national clients. And I got to have a kind of a bird's eye view of corporate culture. I spent much of my time in C-suite executives' offices talking about their business. And what I realized is that advertising can only do so much, in terms of moving the fortunes of a company forward.
Hmm.
And many senior executives in organizations look to messaging and marketing as the currency that determines sales growth. And what I found in studying kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly of corporate culture was that focus, that hyper sensitivity and focus on messaging was completely misplaced. And I saw firsthand so many senior executives, CEOs, CMOs, name the acronym you want, that couldn't understand why they couldn't sustain growth, or why one year sales would be up and the next year sales would be down. And much of the focus was on messaging. Well, we just need better messaging. We need a better advertising campaign. What I came to realize in being in that environment is that their focus was in the wrong place. I have an old expression. You may have heard it before. If mom and dad are fighting, the kids know. You know,
Okay. Yep.
um, and so I saw that happening inside of corporate culture. Disengaged employees, unhappiness, no real true north in terms of purpose or vision. I can't tell you how many times I would sit across from a CEO and say, "What would happen if your business disappeared tomorrow?
Mm,
Would anybody care?"
yeah.
And I got that deer in the headlight stare so many times. And I realized that hyper focus on messaging and marketing and sales and transactions, that was just the wrong filter. What was really going on in corporate culture, and it's at an all-time hyper low today in terms of trust, was that there was dysfunction going on inside of the relationships that existed inside the business and out. So in the same way, the kids know if mom and dad are fighting, employees know if there's discord in senior management, customers know if there's
Mm,
discord, or apathy among the employee groups. And so it was this continuing spiral. And, I had a kind of an epiphany in working with a guy who was close to me in my own business, who, his MBA was in behavioral psychology and social science. And we'd have these ongoing discussions. And he would often say, "Mike, we're all focused on the wrong thing. If we want to help sustain growth in organizations, we need to look at interpersonal relationship building. We can't, marketing is not the filter that we need to look through. It's human behavior. What's really going on here? And what was really going on there is that their trust was being eroded from the inside out, and it permeated entire organizational structure. It permeated relationships between brands and their customers or clients, and it was this kind of revolving door that was being created, where behavior was really much more important than any sales message, even products and services. You know, I wrote a book in 2017 called Choosing Higher Ground, and I was trying to contrast the difference between what I called the transactional economy and the values economy. And what had happened in business is that businesses lost their way. And where in the old days, customers or consumers would hold a business accountable if, you know, their product or service didn't meet their expectations, today they're holding the leaders of organizations accountable. And now with the proliferation of choice, you know, in the old days when I grew up, there were 3
Mhm.
television stations and a couple radio stations, and now there's thousands of media opportunities
You
for all of
just
us.
go somewhere else,
Can
yeah.
go anywhere. So I don't
Mhm.
need your business, you need mine, but you need to connect with me. That's the story that we kept hearing from consumers and customers, is treat me like a human being. Show me that you care about me beyond the transaction. And by the way, what does your business stand for? And are you creating a positive image in the community? Or are you a drain on the community and self-centered in nature? And so I did a lot of research because I was about 30 years into my career at that time, started doing some social science research, and really began to focus my career. I started to exit the day-to-day transactional business that advertising is, and I started looking from a different filter. And I found my conversations beginning to switch when I was sitting across from a leader in an organization. I wasn't talking about their products. I wasn't talking about their services. We used to call that the sea of sameness, right? Um, but what do you stand for? Why are you there? Why are you leading this company? Do you have strong relationships internally with your employees? Do they know that you care about them? And you can see corporate cultures that thrive and you can see corporate cultures that struggle. What I had to convince many very jaded CEOs about was that values was the new currency,
Mhm.
right? It's not about a transaction. It's not about a one-time sale. It's about, will your organization do what it takes to do in interpersonal relationships and earn trust over time? You can't buy it. You know, there's that expression that trust takes decades to build, seconds to lose, and
Yeah.
forever to try to rebuild. And there's so many examples of that in corporate America where companies just lost their way. So um, my my answer to that was I made a determination that I was not going to have the same conversation. I wasn't going to walk in the door as an ad guy, you know, wanting to, you know, shine a light on a bad organization. I wanted to have a different type of conversation, and so I created a different model of relationship building built on 5 principles of what we know it takes to build trust in an interpersonal relationship. I call them the 5 C's.
Okay. Before we get into that, we'll get
Yeah.
into that in just a little bit. So you basically went from sales and trying to sell the company
Yeah.
to hey, we need to focus more on relationships within the company and
Yes.
relationships with the customers. Is that
Yes, that's
kind of
exactly
okay?
right.
And then that's landed you in this niche of we're going to build relationships, build trust, and improve the company culture.
Yeah, and we, you
Okay.
know, we know, David, there's so much secondary research that's been available for decades now on the direct link between highly trusted organizations and low trust organizations, not just in terms of the feel good that you might expect coming from a good relationship, how you feel in a good relationship, but even for the most jaded, um, financially driven organization, there's plenty of research that demonstrates that if you have high trust inside your organization, you're going to outperform your competitors financially, in shareholder return. So it's trust is not a nice to have. Trust is a must have, especially
Yeah.
now.
Yes. That reminds me of one of my earlier guests, Rick Johnson. I think it's probably
Mhm.
episode 6, where
Yeah.
God talked to him and is like, "You are pursuing the fruit. Quit pursuing the fruit and start pursuing the root." And the root meaning take care of the people, invest in people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. That's what he did. He switched and just started investing in people. And yeah, he essentially has a super culture
Yeah.
and very profitable and pay
Yeah.
things off and does a lot better now with a lot less time because you're creating a culture of people doing that.
We talk in similar
So,
language then because, I relate it to, so many, consultants or specialists, come in and I view it as a tree, right?
mhm,
And where we tend to spend most of our time is trying to prune the branches, when what we should be doing is nurturing the soil, right? So that strong roots can grow. And that's what organizations that's the missing ingredient right now, is that there's so much time spent on, the perks. Oh, if we got employee issues, then we need to, we need to have a picnic every 3 weeks, or we need to throw more money and bonuses at people. That's really not it. People have, human needs, and those aren't being met in many organizations. And what I spend my time doing now is tilling the soil, is creating good soil so that those roots can go deep inside of an organization, and that outside the organization, we call that customer loyalty and satisfaction and
yep,
repeat sales. So if you can grow that deep root system and have healthy soil, then all of the fruit is going to come.
okay. So you mentioned about 5 buckets or 5 pillars. What are those
Yeah.
5 areas that you encourage people in their culture?
Yes, these are all interpersonal relationship building dimensions of trust. And I realized in the late evening when I was praying, Lord, if I'm going to go into these organizations, I want to bring godly character, there, whether they're secular or non-secular. It didn't matter to me. The principles were the same. And he actually kind of gave me a revelation in the middle of the night. And as I was going through the 5 C's, as I call them, I was measuring them against Christ. And I realized after that conversation with him that this was my way to bring his principles of relational trust building, into any work environment. So the first one is, competence, which
Okay.
basically says, can you deliver on what you say? But competence goes beyond skills, right? Showing up on time, studying up, being a good practitioner of whatever it is you're there to do in your organization. It has a lot more to do with self-awareness and the emotional intelligence. Many organizations, you've probably seen them, I've seen them, where there is a highly talented individual, but that's where it stops. Nobody wants to be around them because they have
Mhm.
no social skills whatsoever. So competence is first and foremost. The second is consistency. Can I rely on you? Over time, there's so many folks that we deal with, and we are even guilty of it ourselves, of kind of the Jekyll and Hyde syndrome. If somebody's showing up inconsistently in a relationship with you, you're not leaning in, wanting to draw closer. You start beginning to lean away because you're not sure who's going to show up, from day to day. We've seen leaders demonstrate that. You
Yep.
don't know who's walking in the door. It could be your boss. It could be a coworker. It could be your spouse. If that consistency isn't there, then the ability to go deeper into a relationship is going to be stunted. So
Sure.
I
And
call
it's just like
competence. Yeah.
yeah. It's just like, I am in the manufacturing world. If you don't
Yeah,
have consistency, if some days you produce good product and some days you produce bad
right.
product, the next person down the line, they can't do their job consistently because there's so many
Exactly.
things that step one is the prerequisite to step two to step three to step four.
Right.
And so, yeah, consistency is important at every level of the organization.
And
Yeah.
one I often say, look, these are values that we're talking about, interpersonal values, and we don't live out our values in isolation. We were created as relational beings.
Hmm.
We're communal by nature. Isolation is not the norm. Relationship is the norm. And as you say, if you have a group of people, they may be highly competent people in a team, but if there's inconsistent performance, it ripples. Everybody falls down. It affects everybody around you.
Absolutely.
So I call competence and consistency the functional values in building trust. Then we begin to shift. Candor is the next C, and candor is all about transparency and communication. It's about honesty and authenticity, and a word that is rarely used in corporate America, and that's the word vulnerability.
Mm.
We're taught from an early age, don't be vulnerable because that's perceived as weakness. And in a corporate environment, you're going to get eaten alive. And I see this in effect with many women who are in leadership positions. They're very afraid to be vulnerable because they've been taken so much advantage of in the corporate world for so long that they back off and they don't really share what's going on inside. They're not transparent. And that's that first value that begins to get outside of yourself, right? Because competency and consistency tend to be self-focused. Candor is now, how are you dealing with others, right? So am I open in my communication with you? Do you feel like I'm honest? If you don't feel like I'm honest, then our relationship is going to begin to dissipate. It's not going to grow. The fourth C is concern. And that's both true in a corporate environment and an interpersonal environment. And that's the value that says, how do I know that you care about me beyond what you say?
Yeah, I can see that
Right?
because people can recognize that by how you interact with them. If you really care about them or you just care about get the work done.
That's it.
Yes, it's
That's
very
right.
much so. Because if
So,
you're just cared about getting the
yeah.
work done and they got in a wreck that day or a flat tire and you don't care, it's like get moving.
Well,
That doesn't help much with the culture, does it?
no. And, David, there was a survey done a couple years ago that stated that 70% of all employees across organizations in the US were disengaged. And the
I can see
number
that.
one reason that they were disengaged is that they didn't feel like they were being recognized,
Appreciation. Yeah.
appreciated,
Yep.
right? They didn't feel that there was concern for them outside of them being an economic agent to drive sales. It was kind of like, but what about my needs? How does my organization show that they care about me beyond the paycheck? Because I've sat with so many people, David, that they came into an organization believing one thing. They got inside and found out that they were compromising their values for the paycheck,
Mm,
and many of them would tell me in tears, "I stayed too long, and now I'm trapped and I can't get out, but I'm miserable, and I'm carrying that home with me,"
that's
you
too
know?
bad. Yeah.
So, those lines of life at work and life at home, they blur, you're carrying one, to the other. And then the final value is what we call connection, or commitment, and that's really all about going that extra mile, and it measures the depth of relationships. And this one takes effort and time. You can be competent, you can be consistent and reliable in performance. You can be open and honest and transparent in your communications, and even on occasion show that you care about somebody. But the real defining factor is, I like to picture the old couple sitting on the park bench that have been married for years. They almost are at the point where they can finish each other's sentences. You know, that's that commitment that you make to be there through thick and thin. And that takes a real commitment. And takes you outside of yourself into that great idea of serving others. And that's where the transformation really occurs, is when you're making a conscious choice every day of how am I going to show up. And so I keep those 5 C's in my brain every time I'm with somebody, an individual, or I'm walking into a business organization. And by the way, I'm sure you can see this too. Highly functional organizations and trusting organizations or dysfunctional organizations, it's palpable. You can feel it when you walk into a corporate entity, or if you're in a retail environment, you know whether the employees are happy or not. You know whether they really believe what they're saying to you or not.
Yes. And we probably don't have time to go into a lot, but you said something about you have a platform that you help, like a 21
Yeah,
day challenge that you help companies build these values into their employees. Just
right.
give me a 1 or 2 sentence. What is that?
Yeah, it's called Cultivate, and it's an online program for behavioral change. It's getting together a group of employees around a central theme, and typically it's coming out of the values of trust. So we have what we call the 5 C's challenges. That's one of the series that we've put together. But we'll go in and we'll get a group of people, and we'll rally around the idea of what does concern look like inside the organization. Uh, this is based on the principles out of the book uh, Atomic Habits, right?
Mhm.
It's all about small daily actions taken over time that build a behavior. So imagine having 40 or 50 or 100 employees working on a 21-day online challenge that has to do with this idea of how do we show concern? How do we show people that we care about each other? And then they practice it every day, and there's inspiration and encouragement, and it's gamified, so it's fun to participate. And what we've found is that many employee organizations, this becomes their favorite part of the day. It starts their day in a positive, intentional way. That's one of the primary drivers of the challenges, is that many of us go into our day without intention, and boy, if you don't, the day just takes over and you get carried into it, into the abyss. So the idea of pausing and being intentional about how you're going to show up and what you're going to practice that day really makes a world of difference. And we've seen personal and professional growth and change come out of that.
I could see that, because I mean you have two main things there. First of all, you have leadership leading the way, because the leadership has to be involved to get that platform in there to get everybody
Yes.
involved. So you know that they're on board to want to give them better culture. And then it's every day. Let's refocus. Let's refocus. Here's your
Yes.
challenge for today.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, it's great when
Um,
it's beautiful because whether you've been at an organization for 20 years or whether you're the new guy that's 2 days in, if you're both practicing those same principles, you're now a cohesive culture.
it's a bond together, because you both,
Yes,
maybe you both struggle with the same thing, or you're both really good at the same thing. It's another way to bond between them,
right.
and that bonds help production go well too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, we need to wrap up here quickly,
Okay.
but you've talked about a lot of really good things. One focusing question for you.
Yeah.
What is one challenge or inspirational thought that you would like my listeners to take away today and take action on to make a difference in their culture?
Um, I kind of landed on it just a second ago. I really think that if we all took a pause as we walk into each day, even in our own home, when we wake up, it's like, realize that you have a choice to make today. And by the way, each of us is a unique, a unique creation, right? And we have our actions have ramifications like ripples, like a pebble in a pond, that spreads out. So actually, Elvis Presley had a great quote years ago. I use them in presentations. People don't believe it's him when I don't let them know who it is. But he says, values are like fingerprints, and we leave them all over those that we touch.
Okay. Very
right?
good.
So that's the challenge for people. What's your intention today? How are you going to show up? And how are your values going to touch the lives of those around you in a positive way to make their lives better?
I like that. Values as fingerprints. Because, yeah, you touch a lot of things throughout the day.
Right.
Very good. Michael, thank you very much for your time and encouragement today.
You
And
bet.
you listeners, your next steps to be doers and not just hearers is to, one, check out the show notes. We're going to have links in there of the different sites and how to contact Michael and how to learn more about him and look at his platform. Sign up for the newsletter, because that's a great way to communicate with us and to get communication on future episodes. And friends, that's all for now. Trust you've been inspired to redeem your business, redeem your time, buy it back, and walk worthy of God's great name. Bye for now.